Pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Dell Technologies' end-of-year sale is the perfect time to upgrade tech for your business. Save big on the latest computers powered by Intel Core processors for your small business. And don't forget to shop servers, storage, and thousands of top-brand electronics, all with free shipping. Call a Dell Technologies advisor who can help you find the right tech for your business needs at 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
Since we've all been spending so much time at home, you probably figured out all the ways your house doesn't work for today's new lifestyle. Moving isn't an option, so why not consider remodeling? Maybe you need an open-plan kitchen with a school area, a flexible 3-seasons room, or a finished basement. Advanced Design Studio can help you create the reimagined house that works with how your family lives now. Providing positive remodeling experiences for nearly 30 years, Advanced Design's common sense remodeling process makes remodeling predictable, averting delays, and preventing budget overruns to produce a rewarding remodeling experience. Join us remotely Saturday, December 12th at 10 a.m. for Virtual Trends in Design, where you can experience hot new colors, learn about home style trends, and discover all the latest products for your home renovation project. Visit advanceddesignstudio.com and click on events to sign up, or call 847-836-2600 today. That's 847-836-2600.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
638. Worried about basement flooding? Time to call Permaseal, 800-421-SCAL. Let's check the roads in the Team Hochberg Traffic Center with Jim.
We have a lot of problems this morning, starting on the south side where Ashland is blocked between 57th and 59th after a fire at a tire shop at 58th and Ashland. Side streets are closed in that area, including Paulina. And at 47th and Western, there are closures after a major overnight crash, actually at 46th, after a vehicle hit a tree. The investigation is ongoing. Downtown Chicago on westbound Ida B. Wells and the outbound Eisenhower, you're down to one lane from Wells Street to the Burn Circle till 10 this morning. There's no access from the outbound Ike to the outbound Kennedy or from Lower Wacker to the outbound Eisenhower. The Stevenson traffic's a little heavy approaching the Ryan. On the Ryan, it's heavy 18th to the Circle. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Jim, thank you. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. A milder day ahead. Clouds give way to sun, high 47. 33 officially at O'Hare. Next news at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by In the Know with Wealth Management Group, hosted by Craig Bolanos. Heard Sunday mornings at 10.
Eric Swalwell's favorite song, it would appear, this Axios report suggesting that among the many instances of Chinese spycraft over the years was a honeypot that was working her way through Democrat ranks, Kamala Harris style. Eric Swalwell, some Midwestern mayors, volunteered on Ro Khanna's congressional campaign.
Yeah, they're not saying the names of those two Midwestern mayors, but yeah, he admitted. I mean, he'd hit a relationship, but he won't tell people if he had a sexual relationship with her. He wasn't married at the time, but whatever.
There's pictures of her with him that have been posted as well. And the whole point was she was a Chinese spy who has since absconded back to China, as the story goes, vanishing in 2015 when I guess the jig was up and people started to get wise to the fact that she was spying on behalf of the Chinese government. And
Swalwell said that he cut off ties with her in 2015 when U.S. intelligence officials briefed him on their security concerns.
It's
over.
The larger, more interesting story in this area, compromising Eric Swalwell. I mean, talk about picking low-hanging fruit. The larger story is this speech that was given by a Chinese economics professor.
made. He's the vice dean of School of International Relations at Renmin University, and highlighted by Trump on Twitter. It was tackled in part by Tucker Carlson yesterday. This is subtitled in Mandarin, so I don't think you should have to know Mandarin to listen to this show.
Cantonese, not Mandarin, sorry.
So we'll characterize it, but one of the things that this academic said, we know that the Trump administration is in a trade war with us, so why can't we fix the Trump administration? Why did China and the U.S. used to be able to settle all kinds of issues between 1992 and 2016? I'm going to throw something out that may be a little bit explosive here. It's just because we have people at the top. We have our old friends who are at the top of America's core inner circle of power and influence. Our old friends at the top of America's core inner circle of power and influence. And that includes Wall Street. During the U.S.-China trade war, Wall Street tried to help. This is the professor speaking. And I know that my friends on the U.S. side told me that they tried to help, but they couldn't do much. But now we're seeing Biden was elected. The traditional elite, the political elite, the establishment, they're very close to Wall Street. So you see that, right? And then the audience applause. We're back in business, baby.
If you're wondering why our political class has stood by and allowed the Chinese government to degrade this country and our way of life, why they've stood by as the Chinese government has flooded the United States with deadly opioids that have killed hundreds of thousands of people, or have stood by as the Chinese government ripped off billions in intellectual property from our companies, there's your answer. Earlier this year, the chairman of Harvard's chemistry department was arrested for taking $50,000 a month from the Communist Party of China in return for sending secrets and referring top scientists to Beijing. It barely rated as a scandal. You may not even be aware it happened. Why? Because so many are on the take, in effect. Donald Trump was an impediment to this very lucrative arrangement. And for that reason, Di Zhongsheng explains in the video, America's most powerful elites, and he calls them that, got to work on electing a new president.
And why was that Hunter Biden story spiked?
Donald Trump has complained about Hunter Biden and his ties to the Chinese government. Those are real, he just confirms. So now you know why you weren't allowed to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop, why big business aligned as one, the tech companies and the rest, to suppress that story, because they were implicated in it.
And this from Tucker Carlson's interview with Tony Bobulinski, former business partner of Hunter Biden's Chinese venture. And remember what Bobulinski told Tucker Carlson, and had some documentation to back it up.
And in a document that you guys have, and I think it's been provided to to the world, the Chinese referenced that because of their trust in the Biden family, that Chairman Yi and Director Zhang are excited about moving forward in this. And in that document, they reference loaning $5 million to the BD family.
Right.
The BD family is the Biden family.
What are the implications of this going forward? If Joe Biden is elected president, which could very well happen, how does this constrain his ability to deal with China?
Are you asking for my personal opinion?
I am. I'm asking for your opinion as someone who's worked with the Chinese.
So I think Joe Biden and the Biden family are compromised.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Joel Pollack, Breitbart News senior editor-at-large, author of Red November, Will the Country Vote Red for Trump or Red for Socialism? And his new book, Neither Free Nor Fair, the 2020 U.S. Presidential Election, that was released yesterday. So hot off the presses. Joel Pollack, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, and good morning to Chicago and to all of America.
Yeah, and so your reaction to that that speech that was given by this Chinese academic, what it seems to implicate, and putting it all in the context, sort of the way that Tucker did nicely yesterday about what transpired throughout the Trump presidency and near the end of the election with the Hunter Biden revelations.
Well, it confirms what we've already known, which is that the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese industrial elite, where there's a lot of overlap, have long viewed the American business and political elite as a ripe target for influence operations and for control, and that Donald Trump threw a wrench into that, not only because he promised to take on China and he stood up to China on trade, on defense, on foreign policy, on many fronts. But also, Donald Trump stood up to Wall Street. And what you hear from that academic is that the Chinese Communist Party had cultivated relationships with leading figures in American finance and politics, but because Trump had confronted the Wall Street powers that be and confronted the Beltway, the old levers of power that the Chinese government had used to build influence in Washington and in Wall Street weren't working anymore. And so Trump was not susceptible to the control of the Chinese government, and it was greatly frustrating to them, and it was one of the reasons they felt they were constantly on the back foot, losing in the trade war, losing in geopolitical disputes, unable to stop Trump from making advances for American industry, for American foreign policy. Now they feel a sense of relief because Joe Biden has largely brought back all the old retreads from the Obama administration, a lot of the civil servants, the deep staters that China already knows and has cultivated relationships with. And, of course, he's bringing back Wall Street. Wall Street backed Joe Biden heavily, and Wall Street wants to do more business with China. They want to get rid of the tariffs. They want to surrender in the trade war. They want to allow China to expand its influence because they think it's good for their bottom line.
Well, the other thing, and this was not mentioned by Tucker, it's sort of implicated when he talked about that Harvard physicist that was arrested. But the Confucius Institutes that China was setting up and funding to funnel money into universities, and that whole aspect of their spycraft as well, that was starting to be interdicted by the Trump administration.
Yeah, and it's really concerning that the Biden administration seems to be throwing away a lot of what worked under the Trump administration, that they are determined, for example, to go back to the Iran deal, even though Trump showed that the Iran deal was basically useless, that it allowed Iran to develop a nuclear weapon over time, that they were already cheating on the deal, and that Trump has given them a lot of leverage to force Iran to agree to real commitments to end its nuclear program because he's got all these sanctions in place, and he took out their terrorist general, and he stopped them from expanding their regional influence. The Biden team just wants to throw all that away. And likewise with China, they're basically saying, hey, you know, this whole effort to confront China, we don't have to deal with that. We're going to dismantle that and go right back to the way things were. I think that they're going to see some resistance to that policy, not just from within the government, which is where all the resistance to Trump came, but I think you're going to see Americans start to speak out and say, hey, this actually doesn't work. We liked not going to war in the Middle East for 4 years. We liked not appeasing the mullahs in Iran. We liked confronting China and standing up for American interests. So I think that the media have given Biden a pass on this so far, but as he moves closer to implementing his policies, I think you'll start to see some pushback. Of course, the media are all on his side, but I think people are going to start speaking out and saying, hey, this actually worked under Trump. I didn't want to say it while he was still president, but we really need to look harder at this before we go back to the old status quo.
And were you surprised at how the mainstream media just ignored the Hunter Biden story and the fact that Joe Biden was also getting some kickbacks from deals in China and Ukraine?
No, well, I write about this in my ebook, Neither Free Nor Fair, that this is one of the most disturbing things about the election. We've never seen censorship like this in the United States. The difference between the censorship we saw in this election and the censorship we normally recognize as being completely unconstitutional and illegal is that it was censorship largely by private actors, but still that doesn't make a difference to the ordinary person. Censorship is censorship. And the tech companies and the mainstream media censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, even though it had hard physical evidence, even though it was corroborated by Tony Bobolinsky. It was corroborated by us at Breitbart. We had other emails that weren't on the laptop that were actually from one of Hunter Biden's business partners confirming that Hunter Biden and his buddies were running an influence operation and using Joe Biden's position to enrich themselves. That had to be crushed. That had to be suppressed because it showed that Joe Biden had lied to the country when he said that he had never discussed his family's business dealings, period. He likes to add that period. You know, it's one of his little mannerisms, but it was a lie. And yet the media suppressed that. And not only that, they congratulated themselves for doing so. CNN said, this is great, we need more of this kind of censorship. Axios, which is normally very reliable, was really happy about this. And one of their media reporters said, you know, the defense systems worked. We were able to stop this story. Well, there was nothing wrong with the story. The only danger that the story posed was to Joe Biden's presidential ambitions. So I'm not surprised that they did it. I do think that it's very concerning that it happened at all. We can't let it happen again.
Do you hold out any hope that the ongoing Durham investigation, now Special Counsel Durham, may be folding this into his investigation? You know, Ken Starr started out with Whitewater and wound up with Monica Lewinsky. So these things can be very open-ended, and I just wonder, maybe this is just my wistfulness, that Durham stumbled onto some of this Hunter Biden, Joe Biden stuff, in addition to looking at what CIA and FBI was doing with respect to those Russian collusion investigations.
I think so. It might require a separate investigation, but we don't know. I think that Durham is probably going to limit the scope of his investigation. That's what Attorney General William Barr seems to be hinting, that he's found something that's important enough to keep looking at, keep prosecuting, but it looks like he is going to be focusing more narrowly on the crimes in the Russia investigation itself. Now, we don't know what connections there may be between that and the Hunter Biden problems, but Hunter Biden apparently was under investigation for money laundering, and it's not hard to understand why. When you look at some of the arrangements that he made, that his company made, and some of the relationships he had with foreign businessmen in countries like Ukraine, Kazakhstan, China, you know, it's not hard to see why there might be room for concern. Tony Bobolinsky said that $5 million that was supposed to go into a joint venture, into a private company that he was going to be the CEO of, actually went into accounts that were controlled by Hunter Biden, and he later reported that as income for consulting fees. So, you know, that's a kind of embezzlement, I guess, when you take money that's supposed to be invested and you pay yourself with that money. But maybe that was the purpose of the money all along. Maybe the Chinese energy company wanted to, in effect, provide a bribe to Hunter Biden and through him to his father in some way. So we're not at the bottom of this. It may require another special counsel. But again, this was something the American people had the right to know about, and the media just suppressed it completely, and with the help of Silicon Valley. I mean, they made sure that if you shared this story on Twitter, even to criticize it, you were suspended for 12 hours or whatever it was. And we've just never seen anything like that before. And that's why I say this election, while legitimate, was neither free nor fair. It was not a proper democratic election in the sense that people had the freedom to express their views, people were able to access information, that both sides had equal access to the media, that people were able to participate in politics without fear of physical violence. I mean, these are all just basic criteria, and we failed all of them.
Now, I've weighed in on the Texas case before the Supreme Court with respect to the election, but I'm just a Johnny Punchclock who went nights at Loyola Law. I don't have a Harvard degree, law degree, and I haven't been termed by Alan Dershowitz as the best student that he ever had. So, okay. Joel Pollack, since you fit that description, your assessment of the prospect that that Texas case would be successful.
Well, I was talking to my wife about this last night. We went on an evening walk, really kind of flirting with the curfew here in Los Angeles. You know, we have a curfew in California. And she said, well, what do you think of this case? I said, I think they're likely to take it up. I think Texas is probably going to lose the case. So I think they will take it up. I don't think it's going to be successful, at least not entirely. They're looking to compel 4 state legislatures to take up the task of appointing the electors to the Electoral College, saying that these 4 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, have violated their own laws in redesigning their election outside of the state legislatures, going through state courts or state officials. And I think that, you know, there's some merit to the arguments, but I'm not sure that they're actually going to convince the court that all 4 states did this. And I think possibly their strongest case is in Georgia, because there was this consent decree where they had a bill, a compromise bill between Republicans and Democrats that passed in 2019, where they expanded vote by mail and they lowered some of the safeguards. And then in 2020, they had this additional effort spearheaded by Democrat interest groups where they basically forced the Republican officials in the state to accept this kind of court settlement to change the rules again, but they completely cut out the legislature. They completely cut the people out. So I think that's a very strong case for the court to weigh in and say, hey, look, you can't do this. I mean, the state legislature acting is one thing, but you can't circumvent the state legislature. The Constitution says only the state legislatures can decide how electors are appointed. It's not so clear the other states have quite the same problem. There are problems with officials making departures from state law. In Wisconsin, deciding that you could apply for an absentee ballot without a voter ID because you were indefinitely confined, where they really stretched the definition of indefinitely confined. But I think the court's basically going to say, we don't want to set a precedent where states are going to sue each other after an election to say, hey, you administered your election ineffectively or improperly or unconstitutionally, and therefore you have to take down those election results. You have to nullify them and go to the state legislature. I think the court's going to be reluctant to sort of make that a permanent feature of our elections. So they may reverse one or two of these state results, but I don't think they're going to give Texas the full four-state relief that they're seeking. Even if they did, it would just go back to the state legislatures, and they could very well just appoint Biden electors anyway. But anyway, I think it's an important challenge. It's an important principle. We don't want these Democrat lawyers basically going around the people's elected representatives and telling us how to run elections. And again, I write about that in my book. There's this fellow, Mark Elias. I don't know if you've discussed him on the show, but he was the guy who paid for Fusion GPS to build the Russia dossier against President Trump. So he was one of the guys behind the Russia hoax. And then he came back again in 2020, and he started suing all of these battleground states to get them to change their voting rules. I mean, this guy is really something else. He's almost, kind of a cartoon villain. But the same guy who tried to basically steal the 2016 election with this fraudulent Russia hoax came back to try to change the rules so that Democrats would have a much easier time winning in 2020.
He is Joel Pollack, Breitbart News senior editor-at-large and author of the new book, Neither Free Nor Fair, the 2020 U.S. presidential election. Pick that up. Joel, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Hallelujah! Holy
On AM 560.
Where's the Tylenol?
The Answer.
I'm Dan Proft.
And I'm Amy Jacobson. We want to tell you about our 2020 Food for the Poor campaign. Food for the Poor is a nonprofit, faith-based organization that provides food, water, medicine, clothing, and life-saving supplies directly to local organizations throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. Folks, these are places that have been devastated by poverty, disease, and this year, Food for the Poor is helping with a new crisis, COVID. As you can imagine, COVID has made a devastating effect on this part of the world. The only thing between these children and their families and starvation is Food for the Poor.
Food for the Poor partners with local ministry and non-governmental organizations on the ground to get food to these families and children.
Food for the Poor needs your help. For a one-time gift of just $185, you can provide 6 months of emergency food relief for 5 hungry children. That's all it takes.
To make that gift, just call 844-862-4673.
Or go to 560theanswer.com and click on the emergency food relief banner. And thank you in advance for your generosity.
AM 560. The Answer.
Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer, will it be an app or a yellow card if you get a vaccination?
And the fat man calls Amy J. an anti-vaxxer, 707.
But now let's head straight into that newsroom. Here is Mike Scott.
A man shot while exchanging gunfire with police on the north side. O'Hare and Midway to offer COVID testing for travelers and employees. Number 6 Illinois roughs up Duke in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. WIND Chicago News Time, 7 o'clock.
More losses in his attempt to win. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News. 3 setbacks in President Trump's hope to overturn election results.
You can't have fraud and deception and then slightly win a swing